Welcome back to Grifter or Gifted. You know the drill. We dive deep, try to figure out if someone's a true innovator or just playing the game. And today's subject, well, let's just say it's complicated. Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, you could say that again. Weinstein's story, it's like a textbook example of ambition gone wrong, you know?
Yeah,
Power, success, and then, well, we all know what happened.
exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. I mean, you think about the guy, he was behind some of the most critically acclaimed films, right?
Yeah.
But then you have this mountain of allegations against him. It's a real head scratcher trying to separate the art from the artist. You know what I mean?
Right. You almost have to look at it like two separate timelines. Early Weinstein, he was, believe it or not, involved with some films that were actually for good causes.
Really? Had no idea.
Yeah, like The Secret Policeman's Other Ball. It raised money for Amnesty International. Doesn't exactly fit the image we have of him now, does it?
Not at all. So I guess the question is, was that early activism genuine? Or was it all just calculated image building?
That's the million-dollar question. And to get even close to an answer, we've got to look at how he operated throughout his career. Even in those early days, there were signs, hints of that kind of aggressive, gotta win at all costs mentality.
Oh, are you talking about the whole Oscar campaigning thing?
Exactly. This Vulture article, it lays it all out. And let me tell you, the guy was relentless, calling voters directly, throwing these insane parties. It was like a full court press.
That's pretty intense. Sounds like he was willing to do whatever it took to get those awards.
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't always, let's say, ethical. Like there was this whole thing with Gangs of New York where he used Robert Wise's name in the ads.
Robert Wise, the director.
Yeah, the guy who directed The Sound of Music and a bunch of other classics. But get this, Wise hadn't even given his consent for Weinstein to use his name.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty bold. Using a respected director's name like that to promote your own film. It makes you wonder, did he always see people as pawns in his game, even when he was supposedly supporting these good causes?
It's a good question. It's like he couldn't resist pushing the envelope, blurring the lines between right and wrong. And that leads us to ask, was all this ambition, all this drive, was it fueled by a genuine love of film? Or was it just about power and personal gain?
And unfortunately, I think we know that as his power grew, those lines got even blurrier. And that brings us to the really dark part of this story, the allegations of sexual assault and harassment.
Yeah, this is where things get really heavy. We've got multiple sources here, BBC News, BuzzFeed News, all detailing these horrific accounts from women who accuse Weinstein of using his position to prey on them.
The Ashley Manthow story, that one really stuck with me. She says Weinstein lured her to his hotel room, said it was talk about film projects, and then he assaulted her. It's so disturbing.
It is, and what's even more disturbing is that it seems like a pattern. A lot of these women, they felt trapped, They didn't speak out because they were afraid of what would happen to their careers or that no one would believe them.
It's a reminder that this isn't just a Hollywood problem, right? Power imbalances, they exist everywhere. It makes you think about how we can all be more aware of those dynamics, make sure people feel safe to speak up.
Absolutely. And this is where the impact of Weinstein's actions really hits home. It wasn't just the victims who suffered. His company, the Weinstein Company, they took a massive hit too.
Right, and that's where this article from the Corporate Social Responsibility and Business Ethics blog comes in. It's saying the whole scandal basically exposed how important it is for companies to have strong policies in place to protect employees and stakeholders.
And they use this concept called stakeholder theory. Basically, it means a company isn't just responsible to its shareholders, but to everyone who's affected by what they do. Employees, investors, the whole industry, even society at large.
So you're saying Weinstein's actions didn't just hurt the victims, they damaged the whole film industry's reputation. It makes you think, can a company really call itself ethical if it puts profits above everything else?
That's a big question. And this next article from The Week tackles a really sensitive topic. They ask if some women might have actually benefited from working with Weinstein, even though they faced abuse, because of the opportunities he gave them.
It's a difficult topic for sure. And I want to be clear, we are not condoning any kind of abuse whatsoever.
Yeah.
But this article does raise some uncomfortable questions about the tough choices people sometimes have to make to get ahead.
Right. And it's so important to remember that abuse is never some kind of business transaction. The trauma that victims experience, it far outweighs any so-called benefits they might get. It's a tough thing to process, but we have to acknowledge that impact.
Yeah, it really is. And I think this is a good place to transition into the legal fallout of all this. Sky News reports that Weinstein was eventually convicted, right? Rage and sexual assault, 23 years in prison.
That's right, but there's actually some controversy around one of his convictions, the one in Los Angeles. The Nation talks about how it was overturned. It brings up some interesting legal points about, due process and all that. Right, yeah. It's definitely a complicated legal situation.
Hmm.
But no matter what, I think it's important to remember that this doesn't change the harm that was caused, you know, and it doesn't diminish the bravery of the women who came forward.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And speaking of speaking out, the whole Weinstein scandal, it really blew the lid off this whole culture of silence, didn't it? I mean, the hashtag Me Too movement, it just exploded after all this came out.
Oh, for sure. It gave so many survivors the courage to share their stories, to demand justice. It really felt like a watershed moment.
It did. But has Hollywood really changed? Like, how do we measure that? How do we know it's not just lip service?
That's the tough part, isn't it? I mean, some people would say Hollywood's made progress, stricter policies, investigations, support for victims, but others would say it's all just for show, that the same power structures are still in place.
It's hard to tell what's real and what's just PR,
Yeah.
right? I guess only time will tell. But I do think there's more awareness now, more willingness to listen to survivors. That's got to count for something.
I think so too. And that shift in awareness, it all goes back to those women who spoke out against Weinstein. They risked so much, their careers, their reputations, everything.
He did. And it had this ripple effect, not just in Hollywood, but everywhere. Suddenly, powerful people in all kinds of industries were being held accountable. Politics, media, business, you name it.
Exactly. It felt like a real reckoning was happening.
It did. But this is where I get a little cynical. Was it just a moment? Or has something really changed in our culture?
I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, you can't expect one scandal, even one as big as this, to erase these deeply ingrained behaviors overnight. But it was a catalyst. It forced us to confront some ugly truths about power and abuse, and about the systems that protect abusers.
That makes sense. So coming back to our whole grifter or gifted question, where do we land with Harvey Weinstein?
Tough one. On the one hand, there's no denying his talent. He was a visionary in a lot of ways. He launched so many careers. He had this amazing ability to find great stories.
Yeah, but then there's this other side. This guy who allegedly abused his power for decades. It's hard to square those two things.
It really is. It's a struggle a lot of people have when they think about artists who have done terrible things. Can you separate the art from the artist? Can you still appreciate the work? Knowing what you know about the person who created it, there's no easy answer.
And I think it's important to say there's no one right answer, right? Some people feel strongly that you just can't separate the two, that the art is tainted. Others believe you can still appreciate the work without condoning the behavior.
Exactly. It's a personal decision. But I think what matters is having these conversations, being willing to wrestle with these complex issues, and recognizing that even people who create great art can do terrible things.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of hopeful side to all this. If someone as powerful as Harvey Weinstein can be brought down, it shows that no one is above the law. It shows that change is possible.
And that's where Weinstein's legacy gets really interesting. He was a master manipulator, built his whole empire on exploitation. But in a weird way, his downfall might actually lead to a more just world.
It's almost poetic justice, isn't it? This powerful figure brought down by his own abuses of power. And in the process, maybe, he sparked a movement that could change everything.
It really does make you wonder, can good come from evil? Can something positive emerge from all that pain and suffering?
Wow, now those are some big questions. Questions people have been asking forever. I don't know if there are any easy answers, but I do think Weinstein's story shows us that even in the darkest times, there's still hope for change.
Absolutely. And it's up to all of us to, to keep pushing for that change, to make sure that what happened with Weinstein never happens again.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Harvey Weinstein, I just want to say it's complicated, right? There are no easy answers.
Right. Weinstein, he was a master at creating this image of himself, the champion of independent cinema, the visionary, the rule breaker. But was it all just an act?
Or was there some genuine passion in there somewhere? Passion that just got twisted over time by power and greed.
These are the kind of questions we like to grapple with here. There are no easy answers, but by looking at the evidence, talking it through, checking our own biases, maybe we can start to understand.
And that's what Grifter or Gifted is all about. Helping you navigate all this, the ambition, the power, the influence, so you can make up your own mind about these people who shape our culture.
So join us next time as we continue to explore the lives and legacies of, well, let's just say, some pretty interesting character.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the weeds with this one, but I think it's important to zoom out a little, look at the bigger picture.
I agree. This isn't just about Harvey Weinstein, right? It's about the systems that enable this kind of abuse to happen, the power dynamics, the silence, the way we as a society kind of look the other way.
And that means we all have a responsibility to do something about it, right? We have to educate ourselves, recognize the signs, speak up when we see something wrong.
Exactly. And we need to support survivors. We can't just leave it to institutions to fix this. It takes a real cultural shift.
Right, we need to create a world where victims feel safe coming forward, where abusers are held accountable, and where everyone is treated with respect no matter what.
It's a long road ahead, but the fact that we're having these conversations now, that's a good sign. It shows that things are starting to change.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let me just leave you with one final thought.
If someone as powerful as Harvey Weinstein can be brought down, it means that no one is above the law. It means that change is possible.
So keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing for change, and keep fighting for a world where everyone can thrive without fear.
Thanks for joining us on Grifter or Gifted. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into, well, some more fascinating characters.